My name is Ariel Hoy, and I am the Executive Vice President of the Florida Writers Association. FWA is an all-volunteer nonprofit group for all writers at all levels. We do writing conferences, workshops, webinars, podcasts, and events like this one. Thank you for joining us at the Florida Writers Book Expo. We have 60 booths across genres with some amazing authors for you to meet. And we have one of those wonderful authors joining us today. Thank you for being here, Michael Jordan.
Thank you. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Great.
Here's more about Michael. He obtained his undergraduate degree from Ohio, Wesleyan?
Very good.
Yes, University with the highest honors, and his law degree from George Washington University, where he was a member of the Law Review, a trial lawyer and arbitrator. Did I say that right? Arbitrator. He has been recognized as an Ohio super lawyer and named to best lawyers in America. When I read that before, I had all the words, but then saying it out loud, they didn't want to come out. So let's get started with our interview with Michael. So now you do a lot of things in the legal world, and I know there's a lot of writing in that arena, but how did you start writing fiction? What led you down that journey?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing fiction ever since I was a kid. I was the kid in elementary school who wrote the poems and, contributed to the middle school and high school journals for creative writing. I always enjoyed that doing that sort of thing. And then I drifted away from it for some period of time. Going to law school, I was put on the back burner. I was always going to write that book. And I worked on one after I practiced law, and it wound up on a shelf. And I said, I'll get to it next year and revise this. Well, next year turned into 20 years. And I realized if I was ever going to write that book, I better get going. So I pulled it out and I took it seriously. I started going to writers' conferences and I took some classes, and one thing led to another. But it's a lifelong a joy of mine and ambition to finally get a book out there.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because I know so many people kind of in similar situations, they set aside for a while and wonder if they can come back to it. Was it hard to kind of jump back into it, or did you kind of just approach it with a fresh eyes? What was it like jumping back into something you had left for a while?
It was really a fresh eye, because I tried to learn the craft right before I jumped back in, and I realized a number of mistakes I had made the first time around, and I really thought, how can I correct these and make this a story that people would want to read? So it was a very fresh eye, in a sense that I felt I knew much more about the technique and the art of writing than I did before when I did the first crack at it, Ariel.
You know what? I was the same way. I had a story that I tried to write, let it sit, and realized that I needed to learn how to do this. I needed to learn craft. I think we kind of come to that realization sometimes.
Eventually.
More than what you think. So let's talk about your book, and let's talk about, what makes it an exciting book, an interesting book. What can you tell us to get us excited about your novel?
Well, I'll tell you what got me excited about writing it. It's based on a true story. Years ago in Cleveland area, there was a notorious serial killer known as the Torso Murderer, who killed at least a dozen people and left body parts scattered around the town. I mean, the town was in an uproar, paralyzed with fear. Elliot Ness, the famous detective, left Chicago on the Untouchables and moved to Cleveland and became a head of the police and fire departments as a safety director for the city. And it eventually fell to Elliot Ness to try and capture the Torso Murderer. And the killer and Ness got in a pretty personal, battle back and forth. The killer would send letters to the newspapers about how inept Elliot Ness was, how stupid the police were. Catch me if you can. And the public outcry really grew to apprehend this killer. I mean, this is Elliot Ness. He was the famous guy, man. Catch the killer. And the fact that Ness was unable to do so really affected Elliot Ness badly. He began drinking quite heavily. His marriage fell apart, and he left Cleveland under a cloud. His career never really recovered. And they never found the Torso killer.
Oh, wow.
The fact that this guy or person did what they did in Cleveland for so long, eluded Elliot Ness, and vanished without a trace, I just found to be a gripping story. So that led to the basis for my novel.
Mm-hmm.
In my book, I asked the question, what if that killer might still be alive and came back to Cleveland today for one last act of vengeance? So it's a modern day murder mystery that's based on a story of what actually took place.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. And did you have to do a lot of research while you were writing this to try to get some facts straight, or how much research did you need?
Yeah, there was quite a bit, not only to get the facts of the original killing straight, but also to try to set the period. The killings took place into the 30s, possibly into the 40s and 50s. It's all debated, but to write some of the scenes where I described what took place back then, I needed to know what life was like in Cleveland back in that period of time. So I did not only research about the murders, but I tried to look at the original newspaper reporting, because there'd be other articles in the newspapers about life in Cleveland during that period. And that was really helpful to try to piece together, give me some background for writing purposes.
And of course, writers, we love research. Was there anything that you found that you wanted to put in the book, but you couldn't because it just didn't fit in, but it was really interesting? Anything like that?
Yes, there was. There's always something like that. You find these. I think that's a real challenge. You write a book based on historical events. You learn so much that you want to cram it all into the novel, and too often it really doesn't fit. It's just there to show what you've picked up on. You can't really use it. And I picked up on some details of some of the murders, for example, that were very interesting to me, but they just didn't fit the storyline. It sounded like gratuitous. So I had to cut some of those to make it flow much better.
And so what other challenges did you face when you were writing this book? What did you find particularly hard?
Well, I'll say it's probably not uncommon for writers overall, but for me, particularly hard, I had to learn the discipline it takes to rewrite. That is a real challenge, because I think we're all so eager, at least I am, to get the story on the page, and you're so happy it's there and it seems to be flowing, that you really have to force yourself to go back and sit down again and take a look and say, is this the best word I can use?
Right.
Does this dialogue ring true? Read it out loud to yourself and see if it really makes any sense. And that's the sort of thing, for me, that's by far the most difficult aspect of writing, I think, is that this one to go back over the story again and again until you really feel you've got the best choice of words that you could possibly come up with.
Absolutely. And kind of on the flip side, what was the most fun part for you with this book?
Probably the most fun part for me is I have an extended trial scene in the book. And as my background as a trial lawyer, I had a lot of fun making up a case, making something up that I thought was realistic. And, because I read a lot of courtroom dramas, and sometimes I scratch my head and say, God, I just don't think that would work that way. It doesn't seem like it would play out that way. But with my background, I've been in the judge's chambers. I've done all the trial prep. I've been in the back of the courtroom and see what happens and talk to people involved in the trials. I've talked to the court reporters. I've talked to jurors. And I understand that process because that's what I did. And for me to make up a case and make up examination and make a witness reaction and interplay with the jury and have certain things take place in front of the judge are pivotal in terms of how the trial developed, but I thought very realistic.
Yeah.
So that was the most fun for me above all, I think.
Putting all those details in. By the way, I realized I don't think we said the title of your book. It's The Company of Demons.
The Company of Demons.
Didn't say it.
That's it. In fact, coincidentally, I have a copy right here.
There it is. Perfect product placement. So you used your legal knowledge and your experience and your access to people in that community in this book. Is there anything else that you found, pieces of you that went into this book, maybe hobbies or something else that you had background knowledge of that went into the making of the book?
I think what helped me a lot in terms of developing characters is having been, in the legal system for so long and being exposed not just to attorneys, but other people in the system, and then those who aren't in the system and need to become involved in it, clients. People who in the system may be totally a mystery, and suddenly they're thrust into a lawsuit or they're charged with a crime or something of that nature, and it can be an intimidating process. And I've seen, I think practice law can make you cynical sometimes about the human species because you really do see the dark side of people. People who will lie, cheat, and steal, it's there. And I was able to use those traits I'd seen over the years to sit down and make some characters who, some are very challenging, I think. My characters aren't, there's nobody in my book is wearing a white hat necessarily. I have all pretty deeply flawed characters, some of whom have to overcome those flaws. They're going to make it through the book. Mm-hmm. But it's that I think was what was helpful to me based on my past and background.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you have that nice round character development. Now I know also there's so much writing in the legal world. When you work in that world, you're writing all the time. Different things, different briefs, different even emails, lots and lots of writing. Did you ever get burnt out from writing during the day that you didn't feel like writing fiction at night? Was it ever just too much writing?
It's a really good question. I'll say generally not, because the creative writing was really an escape. It's a very different type of writing. When you're writing for a judge, writing a brief for a judge, there's not a sense of mystery there. And the judge, you often at the start of long briefs, you'll have an introduction. You'll summarize the entire, like a synopsis, okay? Mm-hmm. Because a judge doesn't want to guess what's happening. The judge wants to know right up front, what is this case about? Why should I rule in your favor? Mm-hmm. Period. So there's no sense of, leaving. You can't have unreliable characters. You can't have plot twists. You can't have surprise endings. And creative writing, you have all of that. Readers want that. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different style of writing. So I thought that the creative writing was an escapism for me from what I had to do on a day-to-day basis. So it's a profession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Now, is there anything that maybe your mom would say, any funny stories from when you were a kid that showed that you were going to be a writer when you got older? Anything that a teacher might share about you?
And so my mom was a teacher. My mom was an elementary school teacher. So she read to us all the time when we were kids. And I really developed a love of reading. Mm-hmm. And when I started to write my little poems, my mother in particular was very encouraging about that. She thought it was great, to be able to write and to do anything. And she was always supportive of whatever I wanted to do in the writing area. So, I guess that was a big part of my background. It helped a great deal. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any of those poems from when you were a kid still?
Yeah, I actually do. My dear mother saved those things. Oh. I've got some in a scrapbook somewhere. so that's a kind of a treasure from the past. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you write any poetry today, or you stick to fiction?
No, I still write. I write different things today, just because I think it's fun to kind of challenge yourself when you're as a writer. I mean, I write some essays on occasion, still some poetry on occasion. I'm trying to write some short stories now. But I think my favorite is the novel. I mean, I really like the complexity of plotting something out that involves a lot of characters over some period of time as a plot unfolds. And I think that's the most rewarding. When you finally write the end on a 300-page book, that's a pretty good feeling.
Oh, definitely. I finally made it.
Right.
So what are you working on now? Is there another book that you're drafting or plotting or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm working very diligently on a second novel, a World War II thriller. Mm. I was very honored. It was awarded the gold medal in the Florida the Royal Palm Literary Competition last year, and the rubrics that the judges gave were very helpful, and I'm making revisions now based on those. So hope to finish that book up in the next couple of months and see what happens with that. Mm-hmm.
And are you indie published? Do you have a publisher? How do you publish your books?
Well, the first book was published through Greenleaf Book Group in Austin, Texas, which is a small independent publisher, a hybrid, I think they're referred to now. And I was pleased with what happened, but I think everyone's goal as a writer is to try to get into a major publishing house. Mm-hmm. At least that would be what I'd like to try to do with the second book. The first one received enough attention that I think I have a credible shot of trying to take the second book to a larger audience with wider distribution. So that's my goal. If it doesn't work, I will look for a smaller publisher again, either the same one or another one to get it out there. Mm-hmm.
You said your first book was received pretty well. Have you heard? Was there a comment from a reader that made you feel really good, or some kind of feedback you got from someone who read your book that really just made it worth it?
I say there was early on, there was a lot, actually. I was really blessed. The book got some great feedback on Goodreads and Amazon. It still has a 4.2 rating on Amazon after 2 years out, and 3.7 on Goodreads. It was received the silver in the World Palm Literary Competition, the gold in the Florida Book Awards, and all that was fantastic. But the best, to answer your question directly, was when it was before it was out, I contacted an author who I knew casually and asked if he would be kind enough to read the book and give me a cover blurb if he was so inclined. He said, "Look, I know you enough to say yes, but understand, I'm not going to give you a blurb if I don't like your book, because that's my name out there too." I said, "Understand." So he called me up and he said, "I finished your book." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I didn't like it."
No.
He goes, "I loved it. It's one of the best books I read." He goes, "I'll give you a blurb, and I want to come to meet you personally to spend some time, because I want to learn. I want to know how you learn to write the way you do." And that made me feel better than I could possibly have felt about anything. So
definitely. That's wonderful. And you know what? I think that's very, that's good, because, you kind of went out of your comfort zone a bit to kind of give, take that risk that you don't know what kind of feedback.
It's so validating. We all know the work that goes into writing that book, and to first get it out there, and you wonder, will people like it or not? That was so validating. I keep in touch with that author to this day.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So we all get, now you've gotten wonderful feedback, and we all get negative feedback from time to time from just someone who they just weren't the right person for your book or something. How do you manage negative feedback when it comes in? How do you handle that?
Well, it's people say don't read your reviews, and of course we all probably do. I do. I look at every time I get notified I have a new Goodreads review, I see what it says, and there certainly are some that aren't favorable. But I first of all tell myself that they're limited in number. The overwhelming number of people who read the book and note you can't please all the people all the time. And then I do read them too to think, well, is there a valid point here? Have they made a point, or are they just missing the boat? And once in a while you read and you reflect on it and say, well, you know what, that's not an unfair criticism. I would not have done it that way, but it's not an irrational review. I try to take it in that light. So if you learn from some criticism, I take advantage of it.
And where do you see yourself, 5 to 7 years from now? Where do you see yourself with your writing and publishing?
I'm at the age where it's always risky to make long-term plans, but I'm going to stay optimistic. I enjoy this process a lot. Compared to being a trial lawyer, being a writer is a whole lot more fun, I can tell you. And so I don't see myself giving this up. It takes me a while to write a book because of the research that's involved and the way I like the structure. So I'm not going to crank out a book every 6 months or every year. But if I can keep producing books on a regular basis, I'd like to keep doing that as for this foreseeable future. It's I'm not one who sits well in on a lawn chair somewhere. I like to do things and meet people, and writing's given me a perfect vehicle to do that. So I'm gonna ride this pony as long as I can.
I'm the exact same way. I don't do well with sitting still. So what is your process like? You sound like you might do a lot, because you do a lot of research. Do you do a lot of plotting? Are you a heavy plotter, light plotter, maybe not much plotting? What would you describe your process, or how would you?
I'd say I'm a pretty heavy plotter, but the more I learn about writing, the less so. I'll put it this way: when I first took a stab at writing a book so many years ago now, I was plot driven. I said, this is the way it will work. I can structure this. But I read Stephen King's book on writing. And like many other authors, he made the point, but I thought he made it extremely effectively. Your book has to be character driven, or people aren't going to care about it. It doesn't matter how good your plot is. People have to care about the characters. So now when I write, I'm very receptive to making plot variations based on what I think the characters would actually do. I may have a plot and twist in mind, but if I'm writing along and I'm thinking, that character would not do this to make this work, then I sit down and I figure out how it would work with that character.
Right.
So I think that's what's really important about the plot now. So long answer to your question, but I do like to kind of think about where I'm going, but I'm very flexible to change as the characters want me to.
And that's nice. It leaves room for some creativity and it seems more organic that way. I think when you read stories where it's more, the character kind of shapes things that happen in the direction of things. Well, we are about out of time. Michael Jordan, his book is called The Company of Demons. So be sure to stop by his booth and check it out. And he also what is your website? I don't remember if we have it in your booth or not. What's the website?
It's www.michaeljordanbooks.com.
Perfect. michaeljordanbooks.com, and you can learn more about him there. We will have more live interviews of other authors coming up in the next few days. If you're interested in learning more about the Florida Writers Association, not organization, you can visit floridawriters.org. Thank you so much, everyone who's watching, and thank you, Michael, for being here. And have a lovely day.
Thanks to all.
All right. Bye-bye.